This was man 500 here, sitting down at the living room or in the dining room. Here we have the Winchester SX3 sitting in a sight vise that I have here kicking around. So what I'm going to show you today is how to break this shotgun down, how to clean it. I'm not going to go into huge detail, but I'm just going to show you pretty much the basics of what we do. So I'm just going to take it out of here. So the first thing is just make sure that the gun is unloaded, and I like to run through a couple cycles just to be on the safe side. So then we're good to go. Gun's unloaded. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew this screw right here. You'll see at the top. Just go to full length. This is a 26-inch barrel model. You can get the home defense version of it and whatnot. So that's the first thing to come off. Usually when I'm doing this, I like to have this closed. It's not preferred just because you don't know if the gun's unloaded or not, but I already did it. I already racked it through. I know there's no shells in the gun, so there's no problem with that. The next thing I remove is the forearm, or the forestock, some people call it. So just pull that off. It should fit nice and snug on there, and it should come off fairly easy. It might need a little bit of pressure though to do. Now I'm going to go back like this, and the reason I left it closed for the first bit when I took the forearm off is that a lot of times you could go to pull this off and the whole thing will come off. So I like to leave that closed just to pull that part off, and then once I get to this step I will move it back so that I can remove the barrel. Just like so. When I go through and I clean the barrel, I'll remove the choke, which right now it's in modified. I'll remove the choke, run my bore snake through it or whatever I have, most of the times it's paper towel, and replace it as such. And the chokes for these are Invector Plus chokes for the Winchester guns. So next thing I'll remove is the gas chamber. This is a pretty important part to go through and clean. All those little holes right there that you see need to be gone through, cleaned out, and so forth. Also on the inside, there's some O-ring seals on the insides as well. Give those a light coat of oil, and I have my oil sitting here, which is Remington. The Remington oil I use. This is the Action Cleaner, or this is the Cleaning Chemicals version as well. So you can use either of those. But go through that really well. That's what will clog it up if you don't keep it clean. After a certain amount of time, this part will clog up on you. Remove this. This is just a plastic guard to keep everything separated. And then the spring at the back, right there. So remove that, and I usually go through that, give it a light coat of oil as well. Also right here, you'll see this brass ring right here. I like to keep that nice and clean as well, because a lot of times you'll get carbon that builds up on there, and you can see a little bit there already. So that's that all taken apart. I also like to take out the tube, or the plug. Of the tube, there's a plug in there, and this is just simply a piece of dowel. I used to have in there a stick, but that was when we were in a pinch and we needed something for a plug, and in Canada it requires to have it, so that's there. Just remember to put it back in. Also, if I wanted to, and I might make a separate video on this because this is kind of a long procedure, but you can take out the spring inside the tube as well. It takes a little bit of time. You just got to press in on this, press this down, press in on that, and you'll pull the whole thing out. And make sure you keep it away from your face, because it will spring up on you and sometimes hit you in the face. But I'll go into that in maybe a separate video. Now I'll let the action down, just like so, and I will remove this right here. And this is a very important part not to lose. I do this on a hard surface like I'm doing it here, just so you don't lose any parts and pieces. And then after that, this part will be done out just like that. The phone's ringing, so I'm just going to keep going. But that's the action itself. You have your firing pin in there, and there's also a spring on the inside. And I like to also make sure that that has a light coat of oil, just to be on the safe side, because that can sometimes plug up with carbon and whatnots. And then that's just the base for the movement. So now you're completely empty. I like to go in there and clean that out with oil and whatnot. So we've taken apart everything here, we've removed the whole bit. So now what I'm going to do, sometimes this is tricky, but there's two pins right here. And these pins are aluminum, so the trick is not to push on them with anything that like hard. Like you don't want to use a harder metal than aluminum. I'm just going to use the plug of the gun, and hopefully it'll work. And I think it will, hopefully. Yeah, it will. I'm just going to use the plug, and like I said, you don't want to use a hard material because that will affect the pins and it sometimes can damage them. So just push it all the way through. This dowel here is actually ideal. On the other side, you'll see the pins are there. I can just pop them out. Don't lose these as well. Keep these in a safe spot. Pull the pins out. And then now your trigger mechanism is completely free. All your good stuff, all the parts and whatnot that you want to clean are right there. And I can just pull that whole mechanism right out. And there's the trigger, the safety, and the whole 9 yards right there, ready to go. And as you can see with the SX3, everything here is coated. There's no way for any rust to develop, but I still like to go through it and put a nice clean coat of oil on it, and it just doesn't hurt the gun to go and do that. That's about as in-depth as I'm going to go. Everything here, everything on the inside here, you can see is also coated in the same material. Same with the outside exterior. The only problem is with this right here inside the stock of the gun is not treated. So if any of this was to get wet, if I was to drop it overboard, something along those lines, I'd have to go through this and clean it because this stuff isn't treated with the same coating as the inside parts that I've shown to you in this video. Same with this right here. When I take the tube out, the tube spring out, the spring itself is not coated in this, so I have to go through the spring in here as well. It's one of the downfalls to this firearm, but it's still an excellent gun. So, same procedure when you're putting it back together. Usually this fits pretty tightly. Just got to drop that in there, just like that. You'll hear some clicking and whatnots. Just means it's falling into place. Now the trick with this is make sure that your holes line up here, or your pins won't go in correctly. So I believe they're lined up. Usually I hold it up to some light, and your pins should go in. And it's a pretty fussy gun when it comes to putting these pins back in. You just have to have it just right, or they won't go in. And sometimes, I'm going to hold this up to the light here. I can't really see it. And sometimes you may have to use just some light force just to get them in. There we go. There's one. You'll see it should just pop in there just nicely. Like I said, sometimes you'll need to use like the dowel just to put them the full way in. Same with this pin here. You can also use your thumbnail, but I like to use something a little harder. Okay, the other side. Make sure they're even on both sides. Both pins are good. Alright, they're in there. Next thing I like to do is this right here. So how that goes in is this part here. Your firing pin and spring goes right on top. It fits in those grooves. Just like that. And that's how you know it's working. With this part, when I drop it back in, there is a little hole right there that this back part slides into, and that's where the spring down in here comes into play. So what I want to do is drop this down in here, and what I do is I put my finger through this part right here and kind of look down into it. You have to get it in there just right. And it's kind of fussy about this part too. I usually look down like this. You'll see the hole, kind of guide it in there, and then it'll click in like this, but you won't know if the spring is there. So what I like to do is just push on it. Okay, I can feel the tension of the spring. That means I'm good to go. I can pop in my pin, which I haven't lost, and you can test it just like that, and it seems to work. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in my plug. all I'm going to do is just push this down, and you'll see there's a little hole right there. You probably can't see it on camera, but there's a little hole right there. You'll feel it. Just drop it in, and when you move this up, that means that that's not going to fall out. Alright, so next thing I want to do is put in all my mechanisms here. First thing that goes on is a spring, right down to the base. Next thing that goes on is plastic receiver type deal. Got my gas chamber. Your gas chamber should always line up. With this brass part here. That's how I know the gas chamber goes last. And this bar right here off this plastic piece will fall into there as well. I'm going to put on the barrel next. Now, once again, the barrel is a little particular on how it goes on. What I always do is I look at the top ridging here and match it up with the ridging here as well. So I'm going to do that right now. We'll see it will fall into place. And as you can see, I can see that those two linings are going to match up. It means the barrel was in there in the right fashion. Next I'll do this part right here, forestock, all the way down, nice and snug, and then screw my thing in up top, and we should be good to go. Now with this part, I don't like to screw it down too tight, but I like to have it snug. That should be far enough, and the way I test it is I just give the forestock a couple good pulls, make sure it's not no play there, and then let this down. Everything seems to be operating correctly, and you're good to go. That's the SX3 for you, the basics on how to take it apart. Like I said, if I get requests for it, I'll do a more detailed video on how to go through the springs in the stock as well as the spring in the tube itself. So thanks for watching. Sorry about the interruption on midway through that video, the telephone, but it's quite busy here. So that's the SX3 Woodsman 500 here. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.